Have you got any tips for me on investing and collecting Burgundies?
Burgundy, like we say, is a complex region. It's a bit of a minefield. You got to get the right vintages. You really got to be great vineyard sites. So if you want to lay something down for a long time, it probably needs to be at least Premier or Grand Cru. And then thirdly, good producers. There's some people in Burgundy that have great land. They know they're going to sell it. They know they're going to sell it at Grand Cru price. They don't really have to do very much work to make 6 barrels of wine a year. But then there's the serious producers that will make sure that their Grand Cru Burgundy is the most amazing wine and it will last forever. And they're the wines that are going to increase in value. Great vineyard, great producer, great vintage. And they're the kind of wines that you're going to buy. You're going to pay a lot for them, but you sit on them for a long time. Definitely make sure they're stored well. Don't make sure they're in a cellar where the temperature goes up and down. Make sure it's not warm. Your corks will dry out. Make sure it's humid. So all those sort of things. So if you're going to buy a really top-end wine, put it in a cellar and leave it for 20 years, you'll see some investment come back to it.
And what about counterfeit wines? I've heard a little bit about that, but can you tell me a bit?
Yeah, well, counterfeit wines has been a thing which is, it's has been increasing over the last few years. There's been quite a famous case recently, a guy called Rudy Kowanian, who's over in the States, that was making, industrial volumes of faked wine. The fake wine market is very lucrative to the guy that's doing it because he could take this bottle of wine, he could change the vintage, he could kind of slightly sandpaper the label, he could kind of put a bit of mold on it, a bit of dirt on it, something like that. And then rather than selling it as a 2014, he could sell it as, a 1995 or something like that. The counterfeit market generally tends to happen with the red wines. It's a clever market for the counterfeiter because he will sell it to collectors who really desperately want that bottle. They want that bottle of 1929 Romani Conti. And if they find out that there's someone out there that has the bottle, they'll be quite blinkered. So they'll just think, wow, I've got the bottle. They'll buy the bottle, but probably won't pay too much attention to it. And then they open it for all their friends. Obviously, their friends are thrilled because they think they're tasting a 1929 Romani Conti. And then at the end of the day, you drink the evidence. So there's nothing else remaining. So it's become a really a lucrative business, the forgery market. And you've just got to be very vigilant about it. I guess it's like things like art, first edition books, pieces of artwork, or a Picasso or something like that. It's all about kind of finding out where it came from. But yeah, what's made it so lucrative for the wine forgers is the fact that it's drunk, so it's gone after that. It just becomes a memory. Picasso is going to be hanging on the wall for 50 years, and some wine expert's going to come and say, that's not right. But with the wine, you get one chance to decide whether it's right or not.
And what about buying wine at auction?
Buying wine in auction is, it can be, you can get some real bargains. You really know what you need to do. You kind of need to be used to that auction market, especially if you're going for the big bottles. You don't want to accidentally scratch your nose and spend £500,000 by mistake. But yeah, if you know what you're doing, and again, it's good provenance, it's an established auction house with a good reputation, then yeah, you can get bargains. And often, if you're looking for private sellers, people that have either passed away and then selling the cellar through someone like Christie's or Sotheby's or someone like that, that's often the only way that you're going to get hold of that really old kind of iconic wine is through auction houses.
So you mentioned cellars then. Can you give me some tips on how to start my own cellar?
I mean, I think you want to kind of think about what you want to put in there. So you want to mix it with some Grand Cru, some Premier Cru, some Village, and then probably everyday drinking wine is going to be a straight Bourgogne. So you want different levels of wine for different occasions. You want a mixture of red, a mixture of white, a mixture of the Côte de Nuit, a Côte de Beaune, a mixture of Macon. So kind of diversity is good. As regarding storage, you want to be in a place which is dark. You want to be a place which is relatively humid. You can kind of do that by getting a bucket full of sand and just make sure you're constantly keeping that sand wet. In an enclosed room will keep it relatively humid. You don't want to be in vibration, so you don't want sort of movement. And then you really don't want, and probably the most important thing is fluctuations of temperature. If you're thinking about putting it in your garage or somewhere like that, in wintertime, it's going to be right down, it's going to be down sub-zero sometimes, so that wine's going to get very cold. And then, if your garage has sunlight directly on the walls in summertime, a garage like that might get up quite high. And really, you know, wine inside a bottle is a liquid, and what happens is that liquid, as it gets hot, it expands. As it gets cold, it contracts, and you've got your cork in the end. And what you do end up with, if you have big temperature fluctuations, you have something called thermal pistoning, and basically what happens is when it gets hot, pushes the cork out, maybe a millimeter or so. When it gets very cold, it sucks the cork back in, maybe a millimeter again or so. But with that kind of thermal pistoning, that movement of the cork, what it really does is it breaks the seal around the outside of the cork, and it allows oxygen to get in. And if it allows oxygen to get in, your wine's going to oxidize and become, you know, prematurely aged. You know, and that's one thing that we do when we're buying wine as well. You would always look around the capsule. If you're buying a very old wine, if you saw signs of leakage, you know, wine dribbling out underneath the capsule, or wine that had run across the label, they're all kind of, no-nos. They're all sort of warning signs. So yes, a cellar needs to be humid. It needs to be at an even temperature, relatively cool temperature, and it wants to be out the light and out vibration. So if you want to put it, you know, you can put a little rack underneath your stairs, but not for leaving it for 20 years or so. You know, in winter you're going to put your central heating on, your boiler's going to spark up, and you're going to end up with boiled wine. So yeah, it depends on the size of the cellar, really. So.
And what about the size of the bottle? Does that make any big difference?
Yeah, I mean, basically the smaller the bottle, the more quickly it will age, and the bigger the bottle, the more slowly it will age. So if you've got half bottles, you know, they're going to age probably twice as quickly as, or maybe a third as quickly as bottles. And then if you're going up to sort of magnums and then Methuselams and Jeroboams and the really big imperials, those big format, they're going to age very, very slowly. It's really the ratio of liquid compared to the how much liquid is actually touching the cork. So big formats age over a long period of time. But then again, you wouldn't want to buy an Imperial of Grand Cru Burgundy and drink it. You probably wouldn't start drinking that for 30 years.
Yeah.
So you've got to think about, if I'm buying big format, how much time have I got left? You know, they're great investments, and they're great things. You know, if you have your kid's born and you want to give him something great for his 21st birthday, big format bottle, you know, is a great present.
So do the critic scores have much effect on the prices of the wine these days? Probably,
you know, the effect of the critics is less than it used to be. Probably 15, 20 years ago, it had a very significant impact on the price of wine. I think less so nowadays. You know, rise of social media and that sort of thing, more sort of bloggers and things like that. I think people pay less attention to critic scores than they have done in the past. So there will be some effect, but yeah, I don't think it's as relevant as it used to be.